My hands have always been rough. They are the hands of a carpenter, stained with walnut oil and sawdust, scarred by 50 years of holding a hammer and a saw. I have never been ashamed of my work. My father taught me that Jesus himself was a carpenter, and if honest work was good enough for the Savior, it was good enough for me. My name is Thomas, and for 70 years I have walked with the Lord. I have seen valleys, and I have seen mountaintops. But I never thought my faith would be tested in a courtroom, fighting a giant who thought his money could buy the truth. It started in late November. The winter was coming in fast, and the cold was seeping into the bones of my wife, Sarah. Sarah has been my rock since we were 20. But that year, the sickness had taken hold of her lungs. The doctors said she needed a specialized treatment, a series of therapies that our small insurance didn't cover. The cost was $6,000. To some, that is pocket change. To us, it was a mountain. We had $400 in the savings jar in the kitchen. I prayed every night, kneeling by our bed while Sarah slept, listening to the wheeze in her chest. Lord, I would whisper, you are Jehovah Jireh, the provider. Show me the way. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison's personal assistant. Mr. Gregory Harrison was a man who owned half the town. He built shopping malls and luxury apartments. He lived in a mansion on the hill that looked down on our little neighborhood like a castle. I had never met him, but everyone knew of him. He was known for 2 things, his immense wealth and his temper. Mr. Harrison needs a custom gazebo built for his daughter's winter wedding, the assistant said, her voice clipped and hurried. He wants it made of cedar, intricate lattice work, fully heated flooring. He heard you are the best with wood in the county. Can you do it in 3 weeks? 3 weeks was a tight deadline for a job that big, but then she told me the budget. Mr. Harrison is willing to pay $8,000 for labor and materials if it is done to perfection. $8,000. It was the exact answer to my prayer. It would cover the materials, leaving enough for Sarah's treatment with a little left over for a warm Christmas dinner. I will take the job, I said, my hand trembling as I held the phone. For the next 3 weeks, I worked harder than I had in 20 years. I was up before the sun, driving my old rusted truck up the winding road to the Harrison estate. I worked in the biting wind, measuring, cutting, and sanding. I put my heart into that wood. I prayed over every beam. I imagined the bride walking through it, and I imagined my Sarah breathing easily again. I barely saw Mr. Harrison. Occasionally, he would stand on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching me down in the garden like I was an ant. He never waved. He never offered a cup of coffee against the cold. That was fine. I was there to work, not to socialize. 2 days before the wedding, I finished. It was a masterpiece. The cedar smelled sweet and rich. The lattice work was smooth as silk. The heating system in the floor hummed perfectly. I cleaned up every pile of sawdust, leaving the garden pristine. I knocked on the heavy oak front door with my invoice in hand. The butler let me in, looking at my work boots with disdain, and led me to the study. Mr. Harrison was sitting behind a desk that was bigger than my dining room table. He didn't look up when I entered. "The work is done, sir," I said, taking off my cap. "Ready for the wedding." He finally looked up. His eyes were cold, like gray stones. He stood up, walked past me without a word, and went out to the garden. I followed him. He walked around the gazebo, running his hand over the wood. He kicked one of the posts. He looked at the roof. I waited, a smile on my face, expecting him to be pleased. "It's garbage," he said. The smile froze on my face. "Excuse me, sir?" "It's uneven," he lied. He pointed to a beam that was perfectly level. "The wood is low quality, and the color is all wrong. I asked for a honey stain. This is amber." "Sir," I said, my voice shaking, "you approved the stain samples yourself 3 weeks ago, and the level is perfect. I checked it 10 times. He turned on me, his face twisting into a sneer. "Are you calling me a liar in my own house?" "No, sir, I'm just stating the facts. I have the signed agreement right here." I reached for the paper in my pocket. He snatched the paper from my hand, tore it in half, and let the pieces fall onto the snow. "Get off my property," he said quietly. "But the payment," I stammered. "The materials alone cost me $2,000. My wife, she needs this money for her medicine." He laughed. It was a dry, soulless sound. "That sounds like a you problem, old man. You did a shoddy job. You breached the contract by providing incompetence. You get nothing. In fact, you're lucky I don't sue you for ruining my garden view." "Mr. Harrison, please, I'm a Christian man. I did honest work. God sees this." His face darkened. "Take your God and get out. If you're not off my driveway in 2 minutes, I'm calling the police for trespassing." I drove home with tears blurring my vision. When I walked into our small house, Sarah looked up from her chair. She saw my face and knew. She didn't ask about the money. She just held out her arms, and I wept into her shoulder like a child. "We will find another way, Thomas," she whispered, though her breath was short. "The Lord is our shepherd. We shall not want." But I was angry. For the first time in years, a fire burned in my belly. It wasn't just about the money. It was about right and wrong. It was about a man who thought he could crush the poor just because he had gold in his pockets. "I'm taking him to court," I told Sarah the next morning. Sarah looked worried. "Thomas, he is a powerful man. We don't have money for lawyers." "I don't need a high-priced lawyer," I said, putting on my coat. "I have the truth." I filed a claim in small claims court. It seemed simple enough. I had the receipts for the wood. I had photos of the finished gazebo. I had the text messages from his assistant approving the materials. But I underestimated the wickedness of a man with too much power. A week later, I received a letter. It wasn't a court date for small claims. It was a notification from a high-end law firm. Mr. Harrison was countersuing me for damages, emotional distress, and breach of contract. He was claiming the gazebo was dangerous and had to be torn down. He was suing me for $50,000. He had moved the case to a higher court. He knew I couldn't represent myself there. He was trying to bury me. I went to legal aid in town. A young man named David met with me. He was fresh out of law school, wearing a suit that was a little too big for him. He looked at the paperwork and sighed. "Mr. Thomas," David said gently, "they are burying us in paperwork. This is a tactic. They want you to give up. They know you can't afford the legal fees to fight a countersuit of this size." "I didn't do what they say," I insisted. "The gazebo was perfect." "I believe you," David said. "But Mr. Harrison has hired the firm of Sterling and Brock. They are sharks. They will drag this out for years. My advice? Drop your claim. If you drop yours, they might drop the countersuit." "And let him steal my labor?" I asked. "Let him take the bread from my wife's mouth?" David looked down. "It's not fair, but it's the system." I went home and sat in the dark. Sarah was coughing in the other room. The sound tore at my heart. I opened my Bible to Psalm 37. "Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither." "Lord," I prayed, "I am tired. I am small. He is a giant. But you killed giants with a smooth stone. I will not bow to a thief." I called David back. "We fight," I said. The months that followed were a nightmare. Harrison's lawyers delayed everything. They demanded documents I didn't have. They deposed me for 6 hours, asking the same questions over and over, trying to trip me up. They asked if my eyesight was failing. They asked if I had a history of drinking. They tried to paint me as a senile, incompetent old man. Every time I went to court, Mr. Harrison wasn't there. He was too important. He sent his sharks. Finally, the trial date arrived. Sarah insisted on coming even though she was weak. She sat in the front row, wrapped in a shawl, holding her Bible. Harrison's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, stood up first. He was smooth. He spoke with big words. He showed the judge photos of the gazebo, but they were photos taken after someone had clearly taken a sledgehammer to the railings. "Look at this craftsmanship, Your Honor. Sterling sneered. Dangerous. Shoddy. My client had to have it demolished immediately to protect his guests. He had to hire a new team to build a tent at the last minute. This man ruined the wedding. I gasped. That's a lie, I shouted. The judge banged his gavel. Silence, Mr. Thomas. When it was my turn, David did his best. We showed my receipts. We showed my photos taken the day I finished. Mr. Sterling laughed. Photos can be doctored. How do we know these were taken that day? Where are the timestamps? This man is desperate for money. He concocted a scheme to defraud a prominent citizen. It was going badly. The judge, a stern man with glasses, looked skeptical. Harrison's team had expert witnesses, other contractors who were on Harrison's payroll, who swore the wood I used was inferior. They had so many lies. They built a wall of them that blocked out the sun. During the lunch break, I sat on a bench outside the courtroom, my head in my hands. David sat next to me, looking defeated. I'm sorry, Thomas, he said. They are very good at this. Unless we have a smoking gun, I think we're going to lose. I looked over at Sarah. She was praying, her lips moving silently. She opened her eyes and looked at me. God is not deaf, Thomas. Stand still. We went back inside for the closing arguments. I felt a heavy stone in my stomach. Mr. Harrison had finally arrived. He sat in the back, wearing a cashmere coat, looking at his watch as if this whole trial was a waste of his precious time. He caught my eye and smirked. It was the smile of a man who has never lost. Just as the judge was about to speak, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A young woman walked in. She looked nervous. She was wearing a simple coat and holding a cell phone. David leaned over to me. Who is that? I don't know, I whispered. She walked right up to the partition. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking, I have evidence. Mr. Sterling jumped up. Objection! This witness is not on the list. This is highly irregular. The judge looked over his glasses. Who are you, young lady? My name is Maria, she said. I was the wedding photographer for Mr. Harrison's daughter. The room went silent. Mr. Harrison sat up straight, his smirk vanishing. I wasn't going to come, Maria said, looking at me with tears in her eyes. I was afraid. Mr. Harrison told everyone that if we spoke to this man, we'd never work in this town again. But my grandfather was a carpenter, and I couldn't sleep. What evidence do you have? The judge asked. I was filming the rehearsal dinner, Maria said. It was held in the gazebo the night before the wedding, the night after Mr. Thomas finished his work. She held up a USB drive. I have 4 hours of video footage. The gazebo was perfect. People were dancing in it. Mr. Harrison gave a toast standing on the steps. He bragged about the custom cedar work to his guests. Mr. Sterling was shouting now. This is inadmissible. Surprise evidence. The judge banged his gavel so hard it echoed like a gunshot. Sit down, counselor. I want to see that video. For the next 20 minutes, the courtroom watched the screens. There it was. My gazebo, glowing in the soft lights. Sturdy. Beautiful. Level. And there was Mr. Harrison holding a glass of champagne, laughing. The audio was crisp. Look at this woodwork, Harrison said on the video. Got it for a steal. The old guy who built it doesn't know who he's dealing with. I'm not paying him a dime. What's he going to do? Sue me? The entire courtroom gasped. Even the court reporter stopped typing. I looked back at Mr. Harrison. He was pale. He was gripping the bench in front of him so hard his knuckles were white. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor. The judge stopped the video. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't a predatory silence anymore. It was the silence of truth landing like a hammer. The judge turned his chair to face Harrison. His face was red with anger. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, his voice dangerously low, you and your client have wasted this court's time. You have presented perjured testimony. You have falsified evidence regarding the condition of the structure, and you have attempted to defraud an honest man. Your Honor, I didn't know, Sterling stammered. Silence, the judge roared. He looked at me. For the first time, his eyes were soft. Mr. Thomas, I am dismissing the countersuit with prejudice. That means it can never be filed again. He turned back to Harrison. Mr. Harrison, You will pay Mr. Thomas the full $8,000 immediately." I let out a breath I had been holding for 6 months. Sarah squeezed my hand. "But I am not done," the judge continued. "Because of the malicious nature of this case and the intentional fraud committed against a vulnerable senior citizen, I am awarding punitive damages. Mr. Harrison, you will pay Mr. Thomas's legal fees in full, and you will pay an additional $50,000 for pain, suffering, and emotional distress." $50,000. The courtroom spun. That wasn't just Sarah's medicine. That was security. That was our house paid off. That was peace. Harrison stood up, furious. "This is ridiculous. I'll appeal." "If you say one more word," the judge said calmly, "I will have the district attorney look into that video for criminal fraud charges. Sit down." Harrison sat down. When we walked out of the courthouse, the air smelled sweeter than it ever had. It was spring now. The snow had melted. Mr. Harrison came out the side door, surrounded by his lawyers, rushing to his limousine. He didn't look at me. He looked small. For all his millions, for all his power, he looked like a man in chains. Chains of greed, chains of pride. I walked over to Maria, the photographer, who was standing by the curb shaking. "Thank you," I said, taking her hands in my rough ones. "You saved us." She smiled through her tears. "You reminded me of my grandpa. It was the right thing to do." We paid for Sarah's treatment. We paid off the house. We gave a portion to the church, and we even sent a gift basket to David, the young lawyer who stood by us. But the greatest victory wasn't the money. A few months later, I was back in my workshop sanding a rocking chair. The door opened. I turned around, expecting Sarah. It was Mr. Harrison. He looked older. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a casual jacket. He stood awkwardly in the sawdust. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my distance. "I came to bring the check," he said. "The last installment of the settlement." He placed an envelope on my workbench. "You could have mailed it," I said. He looked around the shop. He looked at the crosses I carved for the local church. He looked at the simple, honest tools. "Why didn't you give up?" he asked suddenly. "I buried you in paper. I scared you. I have crushed men twice your size." I picked up a piece of cedar. "Mr. Harrison, you build with money. I build with wood. Wood has grain. It has a direction it wants to go. If you fight the grain, the wood splits. If you work with the truth, the wood holds." I looked him in the eye. "And I serve a God who sees everything. You thought I was alone in that courtroom, but I wasn't. The Lord stood with me." Harrison looked down at his expensive shoes. He stood there for a long time. The silence wasn't hostile this time. It was sad. "I have 5 houses," he whispered, "and I don't think anyone would have done for me what that girl Maria did for you." "Money buys silence, Mr. Harrison," I said softly. "It doesn't buy loyalty, and it certainly doesn't buy peace." He nodded slowly. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Your work on the gazebo. It really was beautiful. My daughter loved it." "Thank you," I said. He walked out into the sunlight. I watched him go. I didn't hate him. I pitied him. He had everything the world says you need, and yet he was the poorest man I had ever met. I turned back to my workbench, picked up my hammer, and continued my work. My hands were rough, my bank account was modest, but my soul was rich. For I had learned that when you walk through the fire, if you hold on to the Master's hand, you will not be burned. And sometimes, just sometimes, God lets you see the giants fall. My name is Thomas, and this is my testimony. If you are facing a giant today, if you are facing a situation where the money and the power are against you, do not be afraid. Stand still, speak the truth, and watch what God can do. Thank you for listening to this story. What would you have done in Thomas's shoes? Would you have given up when the lawyers came? Let me know in the comments below, and please share where you are listening from. May God bless you and keep you until we meet again.